So the question is, vis-a-vis what I was talking about earlier, how does one heighten the remembrance of the present moment, shall we say? And is that not some form of desire? And in the chanting, we say by not holding to, that sensual desire leads to rebirth. And is there a kind of desire that is not sensual desire that leads to rebirth? And can we do this without desire? Is it sort of... Do we have to be not having desire at all to attain liberation? You got that? Okay, good question. So we do differentiate between, I guess there's wholesome desire and unwholesome desire, first of all. Like if I step on a nail outside, it goes into my foot, I have a desire to get the nail out of my foot. And that's biologically wise. So that's a desire, to be free from physical pain. So there's nothing inherently wrong with desire itself. It's the non-understanding of desire that is the problem, if it is problematic. And then the non-understanding of desire leads to attachment desire. So that has to be understood. And I think that's an important distinction, because quite often people say that desire is that they say the second noble truth, the third noble truth is about not having desire. It's really the attachment to desire. And that might sound like just playing with words, but it is significant. Then also we have ideas of aspiration, chanda, as opposed to tanha. So the technical words for desire are in the Pali tanha. And then, of course, as you know, that's divided into three: bhava, vibhava, and kama tanha. So only kama tanha is sensual desire. Bhava and vibhava is more like egotistic desire, the desire to become, right? Which isn't so much a sensual desire as a psychological, ego-driven, self-driven energy at all kinds of levels. So if and certainly I suffered from that as a young monk, where I really wanted to get enlightened. And so that was based on me being an individual that was not enlightened now, that's for sure. And I want to get to this other space where I'm enlightened. And that's the issue of time. Whereas the aspiration to be free from suffering, right, can be based upon just the kind of human predicament. Well, I really don't want to suffer. And that's a kind of good consideration. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to be a mean and nasty person. So that's more like chanda. That's more like aspiration towards goodness. And we all have that. You know, no one wants to suffer. So if you keep in mind that bhava, vibhava, and kama tanha are the issues around the word desire that we are concerned about, in English it gets now, say, usually translated as craving. But how to say, if you look at it in terms of things ceasing and letting go, then let's say I have a strong tendency towards dosa, towards anger. You know, I flare up very easily. People irritate me. I don't like the politics, etc., etc. I don't like the dogs barking next door. I don't like the soup. So my mind is permeated with dosa, with an attitude, and this is a gross example, but extremes are good to consider. And my whole perceptual equipment is aversion. And at some point I realize I'm not a happy puppy. I really suffer. And I'd like to get beyond that. And that's a good desire. Because it's a situation I want to get out of. And you know what? All of us want to be happy. Even the most confused person who does very confused and horrible things wants to be happy. They're just confused in their direction. So then the question is, this urge to be free from this negativity that I experience, how could I proceed to do that? What would be the best way to do that? Now, I might, if I was unintelligent and unskilled in understanding the mind, then I might proceed to just try to get rid of the anger and say to myself, I'm not going to be angry. Or I might just fall into the trap of feeling guilty about the anger and hating myself for the anger. That would also, as we know, would not liberate me. So then I would need intelligence to understand the problem and the solution to the problem, and hence the intelligence of the Buddha's teaching. So then he suggests, or we are taught, that there is a way that you can actually observe anger as an object. And that's the big step from being the subject of anger, either indulging in it or feeling guilty about it. And the big step is to see it as an object, as a mood, as a bodily feeling, as a khandha, these ways we're talking. Now, that's not a function of desire, that's a function of intelligence, that's a function of perspective, right? So then the suggestion is that, well, this anger has a kind of fuel about it. And that fuel is based upon habit, which we call kamma. It's just habitual intentions over a part of a lifetime have created a mind stream which always gets angry and irritated. So maybe that gives me some perspective. Oh, it's not really something I can get rid of. It's something that is in a flow of events. And what could I do about that? Well, I could create the causes for this to not arise in the future. So you could say, and that's part of my desire system. I want to be free from this. But the desire isn't based on sensuality or on ego. It's based on understanding how the mind works and how kamma and vipaka work. And again, it's intelligent. It's a kind of a natural understanding. It's an understanding of nature. So then I see that, okay, when I let's say I feel irritated at the dog barking next door, I can say to myself, oh, irritation's like that. And I begin to hear the words of awareness, and I hear the words and I say, oh, okay, there's the sound. And then I say, oh, I'm adding to it with thought. And why am I added to with thought? I don't want the sound. Ah, I see. I don't want the sound. Oh, I get the insight. So then maybe, I'm encouraged, well, just let the sound come in, see what happens. And I begin to have a different attitude to sound, which was irritating to me. And I have an attitude of acceptance and openness and so on and so forth. So then the process of being happy or being free from anger is something I want, but I'm doing it from intelligence, from wisdom, and then from a skill base I develop around perception, around thought, around bodily feeling, around intentions, a whole skill base. And so I see it as a craft. So to that question, around desire, be careful how you define it. Make sure that you know that when we talk about desire, it's not like all desire. Like Luangpor Viradhammo used to, there's smart desire and there's stupid desire. And if we didn't have desire, we'd never be free from suffering. So in English, desire is a big word. I don't know. I suppose in Thai, you must differentiate between tanha and kwam tongkan or something like that. And in Thai language, would it be obvious that tanha was diluted? And then you'd have ways of talking about wanting which were not diluted? You'd have that in your language? Yeah. And that would be a common sensibility? Okay. But anyway, so that's important. But having said that, wanting to get rid of anger might just mess my mind up, because I'd approach it the wrong way. That's why I needed teaching, and I needed a teacher to say, wait, no, you're not trying to get rid of it. Create the causes and conditions for the non-arising in the future. Create the causes and conditions for the letting go in the present. And so you begin to contemplate causality, and rather than self-blame. If you contemplate causality, then it's not my fault. It just is this causal principle with this condition that arises. Without this condition, that doesn't arise. And so it becomes a kind of intelligent investigation. And then it becomes a kind of feedback loop where you see that if you don't react in the habitual way to anger, that feeds back into a kind of information system. Hey, this works. And then that arouses more attention, more skill, and this works again. So the feedback system kind of feeds into itself towards liberation. So tanha, bhava, becoming, vibhava, getting rid of, and then kama tanha, just the kind of absorption into sense experience. And where we see vibhava and bhava tanha very manifest is in I thinking. And if you just consider when do you really suffer, is when you get caught by something and a sense of I is just rampant. It's just going on. I hate that person. I'm never going to forgive them, or I really want that. I really need that. It's just rampant. And you could see that's rampant attachment. It's not just, minor attachment. And you begin to understand what this idea of Sakkaya Ditthi is, that this personality view, which keeps intruding into life's experience and then grabbing attention, and you become more and more the witness to this personality view, how it manifests in the language of self, and we were talking about self-disparagement earlier, and how the inner tyrant, you're no good, you shouldn't do that, you should try harder, and it seems very real. And yet, this is the inner tyrant. And that awakening is what we're trying to return to. So that awakening, you need the desire to awaken, yeah. But it's not the same as egotistical desire. It's not based on a self-ownership or a self-possession. It's based on wisdom and intelligence. So the more you see that operate, the more your feedback system says that does work, for the skill of awakening and the rapidity of reawakening and the accuracy, maybe if you talk about this in a kind of craft analogy, you kind of see that operating. You get better at it. You get better and better at it, and it kind of compels you to be better at it because it works. And then it works and works and works, and then you fail. And you blow your top again, and you throw a tomato at the person you dislike, and it all falls apart, and then you start again. Okay? And so you need to be very persistent in this work, so that And then in terms of liberation, well, the thing about bhava, vibhava, and kama tanha, it's always this preoccupation with experience, which is born and dies, which is changing. And my kind of thesis around that is, as long as you preoccupy, your attention is preoccupied with that which is coming and going, that's born and dies. You're occupying yourself with birth and death, with samsara. And if attention is not available for some other possibility, you can't be free, because you're not available for freedom, right? So the issue then of craving becomes more an issue of not that craving is like evil or anything wrong. It just, if you're interested in this deep freedom that the Buddha offers us, if you're really interested in that, you have to look in the right place. And the wrong place is in the objects of desire, or the objects which are changing. So then you find a kind of way of enjoying your cappuccino, but realizing that Nibbana is not in a cappuccino, right? So, or some such analogy to be. because you could get into a very sort of heavy mindset. All desire is bad and wrong, which is another mindset, which is it's not about like evil, that desire is evil. It's just you're looking in the wrong place. So what is the right place? The right place is the silence of knowing. And then you have intelligence around the nature of desire. The body, needs comfort and it needs food, but also you begin to see how the need for distraction in our culture is so great. You see, that very pull outside needs to be moderated sometimes, because if I'm always just engaged with media or objects or sex, drugs, and rock and roll or philosophy or thought or all of that preoccupation precludes the possibility of being available to silence and nibbana. Yeah. So it's very much an intelligent investigation of desire, rather than desire being some lump that you can't hang out with. So are there, and in terms of the third noble truth, nirodha, it's the cessation of desire without remainder. Is sometimes we talk about that, or the unshakable deliverance of the heart. So it's phrased in two ways. One is the kind of via negativa, where the cessation of desire, but it's also phrased in a very positive way, the unshakable deliverance of the heart. So not only do you have the abandonment of the causes of craving, but you also have the cultivation of the causes for joy and beauty and happiness. Happiness is allowed. It's okay. And the happiness of dana, right? The happiness of forgiveness, the happiness of mudita, seeing some child happy and laughing. Laughter can be a really neat sound, can't it? You hear someone laughing. Oh, I like that. So there are also in terms of causes and conditions, there are things you can do that actually are in the world of things and objects, but they do not produce the need for distraction. They actually produce a sense of self-satisfaction, of a feeling where, hey, this is good enough. It's all right to be like this. And these are the Brahma Viharas. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha. These are very, very important, because the practice of those they're very fulfilling, and yet they're not based on desire. You look at like the story I always tell about my mother. Happy birthday, Mom. Where, and you've heard this a million times, but I lived with Mom for 9 years. And the last 4 and 5 years, I was going every weekend to Tisurna because we were setting up this new monastery. So I'd go on Saturday morning after I've had breakfast, and then I'd come back on Sunday afternoon at 4. Same trip for 5 years. And that little space, I had someone looking out for Mom in Ottawa. So it was an hour and a half drive. And every Sunday, I'd stop into the independent grocery store in Carleton Place. You know where it is? He knows where it is. And I'd get the driver to buy some flowers. The driver buy some flowers, and then I'd go and and Mom was obviously waiting for me, keen. And I'd go up to the flat and I always have the flowers, very corny, behind my back. And ta-da! And she'd see them and she'd be happy and I'd be happy. Right? I did that for 5 years. And it was great. It was much happier than cappuccino because it was more profound. It wasn't something that I was just consuming. It was something profoundly from my heart. And to be able to do that, dana, and to be able to receive her happiness, mudita, was tremendously fulfilling. So we have all that the Buddha recommends, a lifestyle of generosity and simplicity and those things. And they are a very important foundation for the understanding of tanha. Because if you don't have those factors, life is just too dry, I think. It's just too dry. And then in terms of rebirth, well, what is rebirth? I don't know. I really don't know. But I do know how the sense of ego gets reborn. I can see that, and I can see that suffering. And I can see when my attention abides as silence in the heart or in the Brahma Viharas, it's very fulfilled. And that's about as much as I know about rebirth. I mean, I certainly speculate a bit and believe a bit, but I haven't got a psychic bone in my body. You know, I can barely remember my name, let alone my past lives. So, but rather than speculate about that, because we do a lot, don't we? And I think we have to be careful as Buddhists. We get in a very kind of nihilistic mindset. I don't want to get reborn. Those humans, they're horrible. And, you know, that can be a pretty, a kind of nihilism, which I don't think is very, very good. But in a more positive way, and in a realistic way, which you can see for yourself, unless you're psychic. You know, if you can see all that stuff, then we can chat later. You can tell me what's happening. but you know, the common human being doesn't have much psychic experience. There's a bit of woo-woo that we have, that we hear about, but not very much. Most of it is speculation, and a lot of it is cultural. So say at Wat Nana Chat, there was a kuti that always seemed to be falling apart. And everyone knew there were ghosts there. Well, I used to go and look for them. I couldn't find a ghost, right? And then Luangpor C's father died. And so the coffin was at the edge of the monastery in, what was the name of that monastery? It was one of the branch monasteries. I can't remember. I spent a year there. And so everyone said, well, if there's a corpse there, there'll be a ghost there. So great. So I went there to do an all-night meditation, and the corpse was up on stilts, so I just slept right by it. And I thought, now I'm going to see a ghost. I just fell asleep. I'm a total failure. My culture doesn't have that, you know? My culture just doesn't have that. And maybe some people see it, but at Wat Nana Chat, we didn't have any Thai monks for 2 years because it was a charnel ground. That's where you burn bodies, and that's where ghosts hang out. So what's that, right? So there's a lot around rebirth, which is cultural, but there is a lot in the text as well. So not to deny that, because that would be wrong view, but to just to kind of know that you don't really know. And if you create the idea that I am someone who will be reborn, you're already creating avijja, because you're creating a self-identity. I am this person who is now moving through time, many generations, many lives in the past, many lives in the future. And that in itself is avijja, avijja paccaya sankhara. You're creating a sense of self through culture and other things that you can know is just a thought. Right? That's all it is. It's a thought. So you come back to the silence mind without taking a position that it's right or wrong. You see, it's not like I'm arguing against or for rebirth. I'm just saying that that is just a viewpoint that arises and ceases. And if you have that in place, then you begin to see that all the language of time and self and future and that are simply sanya, perceptions, constructs that arise and cease in the silence of the mind. So then at the time of dying, your predominant mode of interpretation would be the silence of knowing change. Whereas if you really believe in the sense of self and time and all of that, then your predominant mode would be, I am someone who is in a body, and I will go to some other body. And I don't know how that conditions consciousness, but it would be certainly two different ways of dying, two different ways of dying. So in terms of the Third Noble Truth, the language I use is more an attitude of, to develop a kind of attitude rather than any kind of attempt to do anything. So I use words like I was in this retreat, non-becoming, non-resistance. Or I found for a couple of years I was using desirelessness. I found that really like desirelessness. Now what is that? But it puts a tone on my mind. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do. non-becoming. And yet there is the effort to awaken, right? There is the effort to awaken. So the language of desire and the language of self. And you notice that the sense of self comes up very strongly when there is strong tanha and a sense of time and you. So like say anxiety, if you've been unemployed for the last 2 years and you finally have a job interview and there's 50 people lined up for the job and only one person will get it, you're going to be really anxious because you want the job. So what will arise will be time and self. Oh gosh, I hope I'm prepared. Oh God, what should I read? I don't know. I'm so afraid. I need this job. I'm broke. So the sense of self will be very, very strong because it wants the job. And not that you shouldn't feel that, but you can know it as an object. Oh, with this anticipation as condition, there's a strong sense of self that arises, and that's bhava tanha and vibhava tanha. I don't want and I want, and you see how it arises. And in that instance, even though it's very, very powerful, you are creating the causes and conditions for that, the nature of bhava tanha, not to delude you, because you're seeing it objectively rather than being the subject of that. And each time you are more aware of these patterns, each time they fool you less and they dominate consciousness less. Each iteration of awareness of, say, anxiety lessens the strength of anxiety in the future. Each iteration of attachment to anxiety increases anxiety in the future. I mean, it's very, very natural, isn't it, right? So it's a good question because a lot of people do ask that. But remember, it's usually a misinterpretation of the word desire. It's too sort of broad, trying to cover it all like that. Oh, great. Thank you for your question. Saved my day. I was a bit worried there. Shall we meditate? I won't give instruction. We'll just sit quietly.